This next speaker has been a blessing in my life. Steve, 26 years on the bench? 24 years on the bench, circuit court judge in Bartholomew County, right? And Steve announced his retirement I believe you announced it last August, is that correct? Something like that? April. Anyway, I know there were some people in the county happy to see him go because they have a little trouble with the law. But there are those of us that have witnessed the leadership this man has given Bartholomew County, and we're going to lose something special when he steps down. But he's got some greater things to do. We don't know what those are yet, but God's called him to that, and it's going to be interesting to step back and see where God leads Stephen. We go way back. And he's really blessed my life. I've had an opportunity to teach alongside of him. He's ministered to me in a number of ways. He's ministered to the community. He's ministered to St. Bartholomew community for years. And it is my privilege and honor to have your honor here with us today. Gentleman, Judge Steve Heimann.
Thank you, Tom. I really appreciate the opportunity to come here today and to chat with you. And all these many years, I've always had so much respect for Tom and his good judgment and whatnot. And then he called me and asked me to come here and speak today. It's like, whoa, have I been misjudging him all these years about, because I couldn't figure out why he wanted me to come here and speak to this group today. But he made it very clear I was going to be the last speaker. So I've sat here today and I've listened to the other talks from all of these pastors and ministers and men of God, and it's just like we're surrounded in love. We could sit here today, we could sit here tomorrow, we could sit here for the end of the week listening to them. And then it dawned on me, Tom wanted me here so that you guys would be ready to leave at the end of the day. So that's my job, is to get you ready to go out. Topic is called to be men of service, and start off a little bit and ask you, how many of you have teenagers now at home? How many of you have raised teenagers?
Hallelujah.
How many of you have been teenagers? Okay, so about 90% of us. Okay, good. Well, there's some challenges along the way. It can be a constant struggle, a youth wanting to have more freedom, more independence. Parents, we're worried about their decisions and their choices, who they choosing to hang out with. What are they doing with their time, and where are they spending that time? We know we have to let them make more and more choices, but are they really mature enough to make good choices? We love them. We want what is best for them. And we are constantly concerned about the choices they're making in their freedom. Here's the point, guys. Guess what? Sometimes we adults can be like God's teenagers. Think about it. Sometimes we can be like God's teenagers. God doesn't try to control us. We've got free will. He doesn't put a curfew on us or say, you've got to get these chores done before you can go hang out with your buddies. No. We have freedom of choice whether or not we are spiritually mature enough to make those choices.
All right, come on, Doug.
So today, during this talk, I want to have us kind of keep that thought in the back of our minds when we talk about service. Sometimes we can be like God's teenagers. So, first question. Do we really even feel that we're being called to serve? I mean, are there times when we get the notion in the pit of our stomach, or maybe somewhere in the back of our brain, hey, that person could use some help. I'll go and see what I can do to help him. Now, guys, I'm not talking about when one of your buddies calls you up and says, hey, I need to move some things this weekend. Can you come over and help me move them? I got a case of your favorite beer. No. I'm talking about those unexpected times.
Come on, help us.
Maybe you just get the nudge. Somewhere, out of nowhere. Well, actually, I'm going to look at this question with you a little bit later. Who could it be? Who could it be that's calling us to serve? Well, in Matthew chapter 20, verses 26 through 28, Jesus told his apostles, whoever desires to become great among you, let him be your servant. And whoever desires to be first among you, let him be your servant. Just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve. Luke chapter 22, verses 25 and 26. In response to a dispute by his apostles about who among them was the greatest, Jesus told them, the kings of the Gentiles exercise lordship over them, but not so among you. On the contrary, he who is the greatest among you, let him be the younger, and he who governs as he who serves. Remember when Jesus washed the feet of the disciples at the Last Supper and told them to follow his example of service? So, do we really feel like we're being called to serve? Well, Jesus called us 2,000 years ago. He called us to follow him. And when he called us to follow him, he called us to follow him by serving. Whom are we called to serve? I was married 40 years ago, junior in college. And after graduation, I wanted to join the Peace Corps, to save a nation or at least save a small island somewhere. But my wife very patiently said, Steve, we don't have to do anything grandiose. We're just called to help our family, our neighbors, and those people that we come in contact with in our everyday lives. My wife's always been a very extraordinarily wise person. In fact, I read a quote recently from Mother Teresa, she reminded me of what my wife had said all those years ago. Mother Teresa said, be faithful in small things, because it is in them that your strength lies. Be faithful in small things, because it is in them that your strength lies. So, we don't have to do anything grandiose. We just have to recognize when we're being called to serve, and then to serve. So let's go back to that question now. Do we even feel like we're being called to serve? Well, we know Jesus did call us 2,000 years ago. If we don't feel like we're being called to serve, the question becomes why, and really, is it that we don't know that we're being called to serve? We know we're being called to serve. Or is it that we don't notice that we're being called to serve? Well, we heard Reverend Tim talk about Jesus in the parable of the talents, 5, 2, and 1 talents. And the master said, "You wicked, lazy servant." Yes, we know we're being called to serve. What are we going to do if we are not noticing it? That's the question. What are we doing to try to figure out what we're being called to? Well, first of all, congratulations to each and every one of you. Congratulations. I can't say that more strongly. Because you know what? You are here today. You have taken a step, a big step. We've all tried to come here today to help us on our faith journeys. We won't find a complete answer here today and have a 5-year service plan
Come on.
when we leave here today. No. But of this you can be certain when you leave here today. We're on the path where we can start to really listen and discern and keep in mind what Pope John Paul II said, the future starts today, not tomorrow. That is very powerful because we often say, oh, you know, the future, I'll do that in the future, but future starts today, not tomorrow. Now, do you remember when Elijah was in the cave on the Mount of Horeb? The story is set in 1 Kings, and Elijah was told to listen for the voice of the Lord. A strong wind came by, and it was breaking stones and rocks in pieces. The Lord wasn't in that strong wind. Earthquake came, shook the place. The Lord wasn't in the earthquake, and then there was a fire. Elijah didn't find the Lord in the fire. No, the Lord wasn't present in those things. But after that, Elijah heard a small, still voice. And what did Elijah do? He got up. He wrapped himself in his mantle and he went out to the mouth of the cave. And there the Lord told Elijah to go perform certain tasks. Those were acts of service to 3 other people. Gentlemen teenagers. The point is that the small, quiet voices are not something that naturally grabs our attention. I mean, remember, Elijah was making an effort. At that time, he was making an effort after the angel told him to listen to the voice of the Lord. He was making an effort to hear the Lord's voice. God's call didn't come to Elijah in the loudest or most bombastic or forceful means. If Elijah hadn't been listening for God's voice, would he have even heard that small, still voice? And here's the next thing. When Elijah thought he heard that small, still voice, what did he do? He didn't just sit inside the cave. He moved to the mouth of the cave. He made an extra effort to listen for what God was saying. Elijah spent some time listening for God's call to serve. If we're not hearing God's call to serve, then why aren't we? And remember what John Carlstrom said, Reverend Carlstrom said this morning, that we've got to have a relationship here with God before we can have our Christian relationship here with our fellow humans. So, we've all heard, everybody's heard, you can tell somebody's priorities by, where they spend their money, where they spend their time. Well, where does our money and time go? Huh? We spend it on fantasy football? Do Facebook and Twitter gobble up our time? Or 17 hours of ESPN? Do we consciously take the time to listen for God's voice in our lives? One of the things my wife and I do in the morning is that we do a meditation reading in the morning. There are sometimes in the morning those meditations they really, really strike home, and they cause me to think a lot about how I'm treating other people, how I'm viewing other people, and how much fuller my life can be when I am being consciously present on my faith journey. Well, you guys already know this, but if you don't, you can ask Charlie O'Connor, but I'm not a saint, okay? Charlie can verify that for you. Not a hero in any sense. Quite frankly, there are a number of mornings, sometimes when I'm in a rush or something, those morning meditations, sometimes I'm thinking about work or something else that's on my worldly plate. But there's a lot of times when they're very, very powerful. So our next question then is when and where? When and where is it that we feel like we are being called to serve? Is it at home? Is it at church? Is it at work? When and where do we take the time to listen to God's call to us, for us to serve? Well, all of us go to church here. I think we agree to that, take that as a given. But as God's teenagers in church, where are our minds? Where are our hearts? What are we thinking about? I mean, are we Sunday morning? Are we thinking about that fantasy football golf outing that afternoon? Who's coming over to dinner that night? How long Deacon Tom's sermon is going to be that day? I mean, is that what we're thinking about? Where are our hearts and where are our minds? In church, are we simply pew potatoes, waiting to get home to become a couch potato? Go to church so it can be said that we're religious.
Come on now.
Okay? But being religious can be different things to different people.
Amen.
I had a guy who came into court one time and he was like $26,000 behind in his child support. And he stood there and says, Judge, I just can't believe I'm behind in child support at all. Oh, he'd been in there a number of times over the years. I can't believe it because I pay my child support religiously. And I said to him, well, religiously means different things to different people. Some people come to church on Christmas and Easter, and to them that's religious. So, do you just pay your child support on Christmas and Easter? Yeah, I was a little naughty that day. Okay.
Real Doc.
The point is, what do we get out of church besides our Sunday obligation? Do we discuss the sermon with our family? Find out what their thoughts were about it? after we leave church? Or do we talk about Joe Blow's kid and how fussy he was? Or, come on, where are we going to go to eat for lunch today? Pew potatoes. Or none. You know, our time in Sunday church is about an hour a week. There are 168 hours in a week. So we spend about 0.6 of 1% of our time in church on Sunday. What are we doing with the other 99.4% of our week? Let's look at our time. Obviously, we devote a great deal of it to our family, trying to help support them, encourage them, relating to what's going on in this world. But how are we serving our families and helping them on their faith journeys? Have we even prepared ourselves to help them on their faith journeys? And that is the first thing. That is the first thing that we must do. It's kind of like when you're on an airplane and the flight attendant tells you, well, now if this mask comes down for oxygen, put it on yourself first and then help those around you. We've got to prepare ourselves on our faith journey before we can help others. Now, most people I hear talk about faith journeys. They're talking about following this path up the mountain to the pinnacle, to the peak of God's love. Okay? I don't look at it like that. I prefer to look at it as though we're all traveling down different rivers, different streams, creeks, tributaries, and we're traveling down to the ocean of God's love, where there's room for all of us. And we're in this ocean immersed in God's love. All of our faith journeys are different. We're not taking the same path. We're taking different paths. Sometimes in our faith journeys, we kind of get stuck in backwaters, or we get washed up on a sandbar. Just not really making much progress. Maybe we just kind of lost our steam for God. We just kind of petered out. By the way, petered out comes from the 1800s. It's a mining term when you're trying to get into the vein and, in the mine of whatever ore it is you're trying to get, and it just gets smaller, 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 smaller. It came from St. Peter, who was called the Rock of the Church, mining, Rock of the Church, and he denied Jesus 3 times, and so his faith was just kind of declining. So, a little trivia. So, sometimes we get stuck by a dam that is a man-made impediment. Turn our eyes towards pornography, chemical happiness or chemical numbness, or chasing money becomes more important than seeking a relationship with God. But sometimes our faith journey is like going over a waterfall where you really don't know what's going to happen. It's very exciting, like going on a mission trip. What we're doing to help ourselves on our faith journey. What are we doing? Is there anybody that you know in your life? Is there anybody that you know that you really, really admire in the way that they're handling, in the way that they're living, in the way that they're loving in their faith journey? Is there somebody that you know? Have you gone and talked to them and found out how they've gotten over past some of the sandbars? soup kitchen leader, grandparent, neighbor. It doesn't have to be the head of the church. Everybody's on a faith journey. Some of them just are more alive in it than others. Or do you seek out any activities to help on faith journey, where you might learn to listen more carefully for God's call to service? Bible study is absolutely an excellent way to learn more about what we're called to do as servants. And what I learn when I'm in Bible study is what I hear from the other participants. I do okay academically, okay? But in a group, I learn so much more. I learn so much more about how God is in people's lives and how He touches them in extraordinary ways, and how God is in lives in common, ordinary times. I learn so much more from others' observations that I would never, ever learn from just reading words. I encourage you to start your faith journey in Bible study. Let me give you a little example. One time we were talking about Jesus and little children, and a mother in our group said, having a child is like having a piece of your heart taken out of you and allowing it to walk around in the world. You love it like it's still a part of you, but you've given up control over it. Wow. Oh my gosh. To me, that was such powerful imagery. And it helps me understand my responsibility to those pieces of heart that I have allowed out of my life to walk in the world. But more so, it makes me think of how God looks at His children, us. We are a piece of God's heart walking around in the world. And He has given us free will to make our choices. So guys, if you decide to spend some time hanging out in Bible study, who are you hanging out with? You can be hanging out with some folks who will have amazing influence in your faith journey. There's other possibilities. A Lenten book study. We have a Lenten book study in our church. We have over 300 people who attend it for the past 3 years. This year we're doing a 4-week study, Return of the Prodigal Son, or the parishioners can choose a 6-week study, Rediscover Jesus. I told you about the morning meditation that my wife and I do. We read The Word Among Us, and here's a current one. I put a couple others in the back if anybody's interested, just kind of looking at them. It's a good start to the day. Then a few years ago, Ann and I decided, we should read books together, spiritual books together, and then, discuss them, and we can grow more spiritually together. But based upon our experience in Bible study, we thought, wait a second. We learn so much from other people in Bible study. Let's do spiritual books, but invite other people. So we have 10 people in our group. We meet over dinner 4, 5, 6 times a year. These are strongly committed people who believe in serving others, all facets of their lives. They're role models for me, and they make me a better person. I become a more faith-filled person, and I've learned a lot about compassion and a lot about love. I've learned a lot about love for love's sake. not for something in return. I once heard in a sermon that love is wanting good for another. Love is wanting good for another and being willing to work toward that. Love's an action word. It's not passive. Oh, I love you, I love you, I love you. So, potential service activities. My goodness, in your churches. I mean, there's so many opportunities. The St. Vincent de Paul Society. You could have a twinning parish in a third world country. We've had a number of social justice modules called Just Faith to discuss the church's perspective on immigration, death penalty, governmental functions, Christian-Muslim dialogue. You know, social issues are multifaceted. They're not either-or solutions. Often the solution is both and. If we only take 5-minute snippets from our favorite news channel, we won't appreciate the complexities of social issues. And if you take the time to learn more about social issues, maybe you'll find yourself called to serve in one of those areas. Another possibility is going on a retreat like this, or going on retreats that are sponsored elsewhere. I had a number of brochures sent to me, and they're back on this table here. St. Meinrad has midweek and weekend retreats. Some are for men, some are for women, some are for couples. And they're really a good way to take the weekend off and away from somewhere to focus on your relationship and your faith journey. There's a lot of ways to commit service in our communities. Big brothers, big sisters. It's a program that has a tremendous impact in kids' lives. Habitat for Humanity, food pantries. Now, if we know somebody that dies, men, seriously, if you know somebody that dies, what do we do? What do we do? Well, you know, a lot of times we'll go to the funeral home, right? And we may even write out a check to a charity there, okay? And our wives and the women at the church, they'll oftentimes provide meals, right? Men, what do we do? Do we ever get our lawnmower and take it over to the house of the family and mow their yard? They got enough on their plate right now without worrying about cutting their grass or washing their windows. They got people coming in from out of state and whatnot. They got a lot going on. Somebody goes in the hospital and they're going to be there for a while. Do we ever go over and mow their yard? There's a lot of things that we don't do them, not because we're not good people, but because we don't think about them. But if you start hanging around with people that are on their faith journey, they've thought about them. And they'll start implanting those thoughts in all of us. So do we ever visit people in a nursing home or a hospital? This is one of them that I like to ask about, because I know folks who just don't go to the hospital or nursing home because it is too depressing. You know what? If it's too depressing for us to go there for a 20-minute visit, how depressing is it for them to sit there 24/7?
Come on now.
One thing you'll notice, you go into a nursing home and you put your hand out, you put your hand on their hand. You know what's going to happen? They're going to grab your hand and they're going to hold on to it, and they're going to hold your hand until you're gone. You just watch that. They miss that human contact. You're giving them more than your time. You're telling them that they are still of value. Valuable enough for somebody to come over and chat with them. You're giving them contact with the outside world. The outside world that they miss so much. Guys, there's one other area I want to talk to you about where we can be of service. It's an area where we concentrate a good deal of our energy and our efforts. And that's work. That's at our work, at our jobs. Now, how can a judge who serve other people when I sit there and I hear stories or I hear what's going on in people's lives, sometimes 20 minutes, sometimes a couple hours, and what's been going on in their lives that have got them in front of you. That's as a result of dysfunction often that's been going on for years. How can a judge really serve those people? Well, years ago I went to a conference and there was a gentleman up there. Let's see, this guy was he was the head of the Department of Child Services for the whole state of Illinois. And there were a lot of judges in the audience, and he talked to us about, he was familiar with this, what happened was there was this 14-year-old boy. This 14-year-old boy whose parents were getting a divorce. And the father was an alcoholic, he was a drunk. And the mother was needle, IV user, illegal substances, she was a drug addict. And the older sister, who was 17 or 18, she was a prostitute and brought the Johns into the home to help, make extra money. Okay, so the judge had this 14-year-old come into his chambers and sit there and talk with him. And the judge said to that young man, he says, I know your parents are going through this divorce, and things aren't good there with your sister the way it's going. But young man, you are different. You are different than what's going on in that home. And you're going to have to put up with it for a couple more years. But in just a couple more years, you're going to be an adult and you're going to be able to make decisions for yourself. You can go to college and you can make a life for yourself. And our speaker said, that 14-year-old boy's life was he was living hell. But every night when he went to bed, he laid his head on a pillow. And he thought about what that judge had told him. And he clung to that. He clung to that every night. Giving him the hope. Giving him the courage. Giving him the strength. And he got through those years. He went off to college. And he was very successful. In fact, you know what? He became the head of the Department of Child Services for the state of Illinois. That was our guest speaker. So when I'm sentencing somebody, and I'm sending them to jail or wherever, I take time and I talk with them. Tell them why I'm sending them to jail, and I ask them to make it a positive experience. Tell them it's like a timeout. Take some time and reflect on what they did. They're 20 years old, I tell them they got, another 60 years of life to live. They really need to take some time and think about the way they've been living and the way they want to live. Tell them that what I've done is I have judged their action and applied the law to it, but that I try not to be judgmental of them. Don't think about these folks as they're low-life, scumbag dregs of society. No. They are human beings that have made an error, and that error is against the law, and that error is very public now. But God loves them just as much as He loves me. I've made mistakes. Mine haven't been aired out in public. Charlie, be quiet. I have made mistakes. They haven't been aired out in public. God loves us all. So I try to judge but not be judgmental. And you know what, guys? I can't tell you how many of these folks have come back afterwards and thanked me. I mean, I sent them off to prison, but they've come back years later and thanked me for what was said to them. And they listened to it. And they changed the way they looked at their lives. That's one way that I think that I can serve in my job. I have a friend who's a nurse who once told me that she says a prayer every time before she gives somebody a shot. She prays that she gives the shot in the right location and that the medicine in the shot will take care of their illness. It's like, wow, I would have never thought of doing that. Do we ever call God in our jobs to help us? Where are the opportunities for that? Do you have regular interaction with people that are in need? I want to read you a story that was just posted in the last week or so on Facebook. I don't spend a lot of time on Facebook. My wife has it. I don't. She gave it to me. Disclaimer. So this young mother posted, yesterday my son was sick. I picked him up from the sitter and my 6-year-old daughter from school. I decided to run to Target for a few things. I had hoped to be in and out quickly. I found a line with just one person ahead of me and began organizing my items on the conveyor. After placing my items, I look up to see the person ahead of me was an elderly woman. She was paying for her items with change and wanted to purchase each item separately. Part of me, the part of me that had a long, hard day at work, the part of me who had a 1.5-year-old having a meltdown in the cart, the part of me who had set an unnecessary timeline for Target and for getting home, that part of me was frustrated with this woman and with the inconvenience she had placed on me. But then I watched the young cashier with this woman, and I watched him count her change ever so tenderly, taking it from her shaking hands. And I listened to him repeatedly say, "Yes, ma'am." And when she was finished, she asked if she had enough money to buy a reusable bag. And he told her that she did. He went down to get one for her and repackaged the items. Never once did this employee huff, gruff, or roll his eyes. He was nothing but patient and kind. And as I was watching him, I saw my daughter was watching him too. She was down standing next to the woman, watching the employee count the change. And I realized I hadn't been inconvenienced at all, that my daughter was instead witnessing kindness and patience and being taught a valuable lesson by a complete stranger. Furthermore, I realized that I too needed a refresher on the lesson. When the woman had finished, the employee began ringing up my items and thanked me for my patience. And I then thanked him for teaching patience and kindness by his treatment with the elderly woman. And although my timeline at Target was askew, I pushed my cart through the store looking for the manager to let the manager know about this employee's kindness and patience. When we left Target, we had a cart full of consumable items. But what was more important, we left with a heart full of gratitude for such an invaluable lesson. If you're ever at Target at Glendale, give Ishmael a smile and a nod. The world could use more people like him. We just don't know how much common courtesies mean to other people. I had a woman come up to me on the street probably 4 or 5 years ago, and she looked at me and she, "Oh, Judge Heimann, Judge Heimann." And she's just like struggling to get her breath. I just want to thank you. I just want to thank you for what you did for me. You just did the most kind thing in the world. I'm looking at her and thinking like, okay, lady, who are you and what did I do? Judge, you were so kind to me. And then she looked at me and said, well, you may not remember me, but a few years ago I was in your court. And I was sitting there in the witness stand. I sit here, the witness is there. And it was the lowest point in my life. And you were so kind. You reached in your drawer and you got out a box of Kleenexes. And you gave me a Kleenex. We're standing out on the street. And this woman is bawling and telling me that what I had done by giving her a Kleenex was the kindest thing that anyone had done for her. And it meant so much that she was standing there bawling her eyes out then. We don't know what we do and how it affects others. People in the workforce are not human capital. They're human beings. And how I treat people at work is in part as a result of praying every morning on the way to work. For years I prayed for patience and wisdom. Now I also pray for humility, strength, and courage. What do you pray for yourself at work? What can you ask for in your life to make you more open to having a servant's heart while you are at work? Well, we're just about at the end of my time here, and the point here today is not to lecture you on how you should progress on your faith journey. The point here today is to make sure that you understand that the future starts today, not tomorrow. I'm going to ask you to do 2 simple things this week. First, I want you to smile at least 3 people who are strangers. Greet them. Come to the street corner, they're standing there on the street corner, greet them. Hey, how you doing today? 3 people that are strangers. Grocery store, I don't care. Try to make it somebody who appears like maybe they're down on their luck, or they're lonely, or somebody that doesn't look like you. 3 people this week. Greet them cheerfully. Second, I ask that you simply commit 15 minutes a day, which equals 1% of your time this week. Just take my word on it. My dad was a math teacher, okay? Just take my word on it. 15 minutes a day this week to reflect on servanthood. First, to reflect on attitude. Attitude about servanthood. Second, reflect on what might be done to strengthen resolve and the ability to hear God's quiet voice, and the nudging of the Holy Spirit towards service. And finally, write down each day what your thoughts were during your reflection. And you know what? By doing this, you will be moving to the mouth of the cave. So we're going to end here today with, whoops, I skipped a paragraph. Way back in the 1990s, John Carlstrom and I were co-leaders of Men's Weekend Retreat. He was a spiritual leader, and I was his sidekick. John came up with a theme for the weekend, and that theme was blessed to be a blessing. But gentlemen, the amazing thing is that we really do receive more out of serving others than what the people receive from us. We truly are blessed to be a blessing. So we'll end with where we started. What did Deacon Tom tell us first thing this morning? St. Francis said, preach the gospel at all times, and when necessary, use words. Men of service, there's a Haitian saying, God provides. It's up to man to share. Thank you.